heard a voice, and that voice said, "You'll never act another day the rest of your life." Like a cosmic steroid, I literally felt it move through me, like just the saliva of a Sonoran toad that is actually extracted while they're in the middle of consummating. And the tribes that work with it in the Amazon will do it before they go hunting because it heightens your senses. This world is a cosmic joke. Do a 10-day silent meditation is the best plant medicine you'll ever do.
Meet Seaman, former Hollywood actor turned conscious entrepreneur and healer. Co-founder of Living Prana, he traded scripts for psychedelics, red carpets for ritual, and now serves transformation with functional foods and ancient wisdom.
Psychedelics, a word which is quite mysterious for most of them. How come that's not legal in the world?
We could talk about the control of the big pharma and where they can't. If I get out of the idea that there's some evil force limiting access to what is God-given for our opportunity to grow and ultimately awaken, it is a moving needle right now.
Why is the fourth way and the Gurdjieff's philosophy so mysterious and mystical in nature? What has been your deepest fear that took you a long time first to accept and say goodbye? Ryan, thank you so much. Such a pleasure having you here on the podcast, my friend. Thank you.
Pleasure, Gaurav. So happy to be here.
Thank you. It was so fascinating doing research on your life. I mean, somebody who started his journey from Hollywood as an actor, as a screenwriter, to taking the different turns in his life from being a healer, gotten into spirituality, into biohacking, and now entrepreneurship. It has been a fascinating journey for you.
Indeed. Indeed it has.
Tell us, how did Hollywood happen to you? I mean, that's a very fascinating subject to explore.
It's a fair question. I grew up in Lincoln, Nebraska, small town, Midwest, United States, very conservative, not a lot of adventures to be had necessarily. And at one point, I made the choice to study abroad in Australia. And that was the first time I kind of woke up to the idea that I didn't have to do what my parents did or what my very small little insular bubble did. I could live anywhere and do anything. And at that point, I realized, well, if I can do anything, why not pursue acting? And the reason I wanted to do it primarily was I had a very strong fear of public speaking. So rather than avoid that, I wanted to lean into it.
Go through something to grow through.
Beautifully put.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I could relate to that, Ryan. I did theater. I tried my luck to get into acting. I did some theater with a gentleman called Barry John.
Okay.
He's quite a celebrated name in India. He has trained a few of the best actors in the country. And as the luck would have it, I had a bad back injury.
Ooh.
And it stopped my journey into Bollywood.
Wow. How old were you when that happened?
I was around 23 at that point in time, 23, 24.
Oh, that's hard.
Yeah. And, but tell us, how is it to be a part of Hollywood? I mean, you did follow your heart. You were involved in one of the series called The Days of Our Lives. You did screenwriting as well.
You know, it's a very complex machine. And being on a soap opera, which is kind of like a B-level acting, it's not quite the film and series television, but it was an incredible, for me, coming from my otherwise modest upbringing, was just a profound kind of wonderland of discovery. Primarily because in the art of acting, as you can appreciate, there's this experience of understanding oneself, exploring aspects of the self, of the psyche that you wouldn't normally get from daily life because you're taking on roles and exploring characters and understanding the human condition on a new level. So it really opened me up to a healing process in my own psychology as well as a discovery of my fascination with the psychology as well. Yeah.
So you always had interest in psychology to understand how a human brain works.
More and more, yeah. Once I kind of accessed that part of myself, I was in my early 20s and mid 20s when I was acting, and the discovery of myself, was just part of my discovery process. It was almost like therapy. And back to your original question, just being in Hollywood, there's such a unique, it's almost like a caste system in a way. Like while most people are hopefully conscious and conscientious of others, there's still kind of an elevated, status that you have relative to your role within the production. And it's a humbling experience to not lean into the ego that wants to take that serious when you're the actor and they're coddling to you as you come onto set and things like that. It was a nice thing to see and feel and then realize that's really not how I want to live.
It's like just because you're a godfather in the movie does not mean that you're a godfather in real life.
Right. You still got to go home and wash your clothes and all the things.
So at that point in time, in your mid-20s, when you were just getting started, who was your role model?
Wow. I would say that throughout my life, my father's been my role model. Not necessarily in the field of acting, but in the field of being. Like my father has been the best example of what kindness looks like and what care looks like, that's genuine, that's unconditional. So within the acting realms, there are several actors I find to be incredible talents or just gifted in their capacity to lose themselves in a role. And suddenly you don't see Daniel Day-Lewis, right? You see Abraham Lincoln. You genuinely lose the thought that that's a human other than the one they're portraying. So it's actors like Daniel Day-Lewis, for example. I always found Ewan McGregor is another one that I would genuinely experience the role they were playing based on their embodiment of it. Yeah.
They would just get into the character rather than playing their own role in the movie. They would step into that, what it means to be Abraham Lincoln for that matter.
There you go. Yeah.
So what happened suddenly that you thought that now it's enough of glitters and the lights and the celebrity status or being on the stage with all these actors, and now it's high time for me. My archetypes want something else to express in the world through me. What happened?
In a phrase, it was my Saturn return. So astrologically, at right around 27, 28 years old, for about 3 years, Saturn returns, and it's at the same place in the sky it was when you were born, and that's a very evolutionary time, and it's a very transformational time. So for me, I had an experience of really having to check, is this my soul's calling, or is this my ego's pursuit and my ego's desire for the fame, for the fortune, for the things that come with Hollywood? What was drawing me to that? And I had to be honest with myself that it was more the latter. And part of how it came to be was I had come to a place where the soap opera came to an end after 3 years. A screenplay I had co-written that was about to be produced fell through. The relationship I was in crumbled, and everything, it's like the rug got pulled out. And fortunately, when the series ended, my girlfriend at the time encouraged me to go get massage therapy certified instead of going back to waiting tables to make ends meet. And it was in that process where I really discovered that my soul's yearning, my calling, my dharma, right, was the healing arts and not the dramatic arts. And so those things being stripped away and having that ability to find a profound teacher and to really recognize, oh, there's something more that wants to live through me, a different archetype, as we will.
How did you identify it's your ego's push that's pushing you in this world of Hollywood? And how did you identify? How did you relate? How did you discover? How did you acknowledge? How did you accept?
I think the easiest answer is by the grace of God, to be honest. I was genuinely still pursuing acting while developing my healing arts practices and modalities. And a profound experience while in Chichen Itza, which is a Mayan pyramid grounds in Mexico. I was running on the ball court. There's an ancient Mayan sport, and there's a whole little cement circle, and they would throw this ball, and it's kind of like Hogwarts and Harry Potter. And there's this moment where I'm running on the court, feeling a connection to a past life that I lived and experienced that previously. And in that moment, I heard a voice, and that voice said, you'll never act another day the rest of your life. I stopped on a dime, looked around, there was no one. It didn't even really occur to me that the significance of that moment, other than I just kind of accepted, okay, I heard that, and okay, and went on with my day. I land back, and this is after I just wrapped my biggest feature film. I land back in LA. My agent calls me and got into a fight with my manager, and she dropped me from the agency and called my manager and said, what's the story? And it just sounded so absurd that I dropped him, and I never acted another day the rest of my life. It just happened that quickly. So I was still pursuing it while training, and in that way, something else, something higher told me I wasn't capable at that stage of my life to recognize just how much my ego was still dictating that pursuit. And, you know, the sunk cost of how much time and energy I'd invested in it was also part of the parameters I examined to understand, to stay in it, I should say. But that's a big point too, is we can't allow the consideration of sunk cost to dictate whether or not we stay in something we know we don't belong in. And that could be a relationship, that could be a lot of things. And so for me, I wasn't willing to give up that sunk cost. And then I got the direct messaging, and then the universe took care of it for me. And but that's a big lesson, even as I'm saying it, to remind myself that when that calling is true and clear and from center and from that listening in the silence, you have to heed that call, regardless of how it might look or what sunk costs come with it, right?
You know, it reminds me of a conversation, and this is from Mahabharata, a mythological story from India. You know, Arjuna, after the war of Kurukshetra, left everything. And one day he got a message from Lord Krishna that I'm going back. Now you take care of everything here. And then, because of some reason, he got into another battle with a dacoit. And suddenly he realized that the gifts that he was blessed with, they're not supporting him. The Gandhi, the bow and the arrow that he was blessed with, it was not supporting him. Went back, got into conversation, and he got another message that, you know, you were given this gift for a purpose. And once the purpose is done, they've been taken away from you. You started with that you wanted to get into public speaking. You learned that because that's what you asked for.
Right.
You learned that, and then, okay, from this point onwards, you're not going to act even for a single day.
Beautifully connected, yeah.
And then for the next 2 decades, you were invited into spiritual healing for yourself, a world of self-awareness transformation, and where you are going to question your unconscious patterns. How were those 2 decades like?
Transformational, difficult, amazing, intense. It was all spectrums of extreme on both polarities. I've been a practicing yogi since I was 21. So I've got 30 years of yoga at this stage under my belt. At that stage, I was on the mat and recognizing the power of that ancient practice and the ability to essentially unify opposites and Ida Pingala, right? And this experience of understanding that science of yoga led me to realize that there's a lot more I need to learn. That's the body, which of course trains us to be able to meditate, to then work with the mind. And I had a lot of work to do with the mind. So that 20 years from, getting my transformational bodywork certification with my primary teacher to entering into a fourth way mystery school, the Gurdjieffian, Gurdjieff's work, and learning a great many traditions within the framework of that system and that understanding of the human condition, and going deeper into Pythagoras' teachings and Carl Jung's work and understanding, you have to feel those edges that are painfully uncomfortable to really know them. And so it's experiential, not just, knowledge that you acquire. So while I was learning in a scholarly way, I was also experientially being taken through so many layers of ego from like mold intoxication is one that was a big one, as it relates to the deep, dark caverns I had to go into in my own journey of discovering just how unconscious I really am, we really are, until we're not, until we actually bring the light of consciousness to that which is otherwise shadowed, until we're ripe and ready to face it.
Yeah. Tell us more about the Gurdjieff's philosophy. What is his philosophy?
Man is asleep. We are automatons at the wheel more often than we're willing to admit or really look into. And so it's a process of self-remembering and to effectively see what he would call the doctrine of the many eyes, right? So
Doctrine of many eyes.
Doctrine of the many eyes, like the I apostrophe S, meaning that there are so many identifications and false personalities that we employ, built upon, we can go into psychology and trauma-based identification. And his understanding, and one of the biggest pieces for me was the awareness that formless comes into form through sound. And if you understand the nature of the octave, the notes in the octave, you can actually track and stage through what is effectively alchemy or manifestation, right? So the do note has a specific tonality to it. And this is true both in music theory and in this Gurdjieffian theory. Do, re, mi, those are the affirming energies, right? That's the initiatory moving forward. And every action has an equal and opposite reaction. So we're going to hit a shock point. This is physics, right? We're going to hit a shock point that will be denying energy of equal measure because every action has an equal and opposite reaction. So then we go into the fa note and the so note. That's the resistance or the denying energy. So affirming, denying, or initiation, resistance. And then there's a third force. And that's what most of us fail to realize to bring something to fulfillment, and we'll get pivoted or distracted or somehow turned away from fulfilling the aim. So the real philosophy, if you want to just name it in 3 words, is remember your aim. That's what you have to do always, remember your aim. If you have an intention and it's clear, and having just come from a Buddhist retreat in Dharamsala, to have this experience of understanding the importance of intention all the way down to a level of, if I am clear in my intention, I know what my aim is, then I'll bring in that third force, which is reconciling energy. Alchemy, how do you reconcile? There are no problems, only solutions, right? John Lennon. The awareness that there is a welcoming of the resistance because it's a necessary piece of the puzzle. So instead of wishing it wasn't so or contracting in the face of, boom, channel it, churn it, alchemize it, bring it to the fulfillment of the aim because the energy is there for that purpose.
Know your intentions, remember your aim, and reconcile. And I just loved it when you spoke about that we all have multiple eyes. And the idea is at one point in time, like I peel off the onion, it's my responsibility to remember that I remember my aim and continue to peel off that identity which is not serving me, which is not bringing a sense of stillness, ease within myself, and equilibrium around. Gurdjieff speaks about the bringing together of Sufism, Buddhism, and Christianity. So when he talks about his philosophy is known as the fourth way. What is that?
So the fourth way is an understanding that Gurdjieff had that effectively, if the wisdom of the East isn't integrated into the energy of the West, it will lead to the destruction of our species. We will destroy ourselves. So he realized that requires us to effectively wake up, to see that we're asleep, right? And he realized, well, traditionally there are 3 pathways to that experience, predominantly mail orders for one part, but also that there's the way of the mind. That's the yogi. That's the one that goes off to the cave and does the meditative practices to transcend or to fully integrate himself into an illuminated state of being, enlightenment, if you will. Then you've got the way of the heart, the monastic order, the priests, the monks that go into a space of communal worship, right? And then there's the way of the body, the Sufi, the fakir who's doing the whirling dervish to, in his body, attain that same state of realized being. But what Gurdjieff realized is all 3 of those pathways require one to remove themselves from the marketplace and go off to an order or to a cave to attain enlightenment. And if we don't all achieve enlightenment, if all sentient beings aren't on that pathway, and knowing that is going to be the demise of our species, then there must be a fourth way, another way. And that's waking up in the marketplace, using the marketplace as your vehicle for self-remembering.
As a mirror of what's happening to me.
Right, like here we are, we're in traffic,
Yeah.
and someone cuts us off and we might immediately react. Or does that become the shock point that reminds us to wake up, to presence ourselves, not lose our equanimity?
And as you are bringing the paradox of East and West, something which is emerging for me is Nisargadatta Maharaj said in one of the quotes, he said, love says I'm everything. Love says I'm everything. Wisdom says I'm nothing. In between, life flows. Why is the fourth way and the Gurdjieff's philosophy so mysterious and mystical in nature? Not many people know about that, and yet people who follow his philosophy, they are flying, they are floating at a very different orbit altogether.
You know, Gurdjieff in his younger years went in pursuit of this knowledge and went through the Egyptian mystery schools and found the Saramung Brotherhood, a deep ancient sect of men and women who studied the movements and the practices to basically see the construct of the human unconscious in their unique ways. And I think because it's a secret order, it requires one to actually have to reach out. I believe our culture effectively perpetuates our sleep, keeps us identified, consuming in the ways that we are prone to based on our cravings and aversions of actually feeling the isness of being without need for something externally to validate us. So I feel like it's something that you have to seek out, you know, by and large. And that's so in that way, there's a yearning, there's a draw.
What has been your deepest fear that took you a long time to first accept, deal, and say goodbye to?
I mean, the one that's present for me and quite honestly remains my task to not identify with is the feeling that I'm not enough. That somehow, in some way, I did something wrong, and it's like that original sin kind of thing, seated, that there's something I've done wrong that will make me less than divine. And rather than utilize the external world as a metric for validation that says I'm enough, or is going to confirm my already existing confirmation bias that I'm not enough, it has nothing to do with success or failure, but rather really genuinely enjoying what I'm doing. And like Joseph Campbell said, follow your bliss. So if I'm doing what I enjoy, regardless of the outcome being like if I fail or if I succeed, and if I'm enjoying it, then failure or success it's not up to me anyway. Yeah. So why would I bother having a fear that I'm holding it back, I'm not enough, so I won't try, which was, that happened in childhood, and of course led to a lot of opportunities for growth down the line to step into the space that's a complete fallacy. And but it remains my work. Yeah.
And thank you for sharing this. Takes a lot of guts, takes a lot of courage.
What about you?
Vulnerability.
What's your deepest fear?
That's what I'm coming to.
Beautiful.
It's so relatable that I'm not enough. Mm-hmm. When you said that Joseph Campbell spoke about that follow your bliss, he also said that the cave that you fear the most holds the treasure that you have been seeking. Mm-hmm. Bloody the challenges, how to enter that cave.
Yeah.
Somewhere I read that you had a direct transmission of astrology in Egypt. For me, that was like, hey, how does that work? What happened?
That's a great question. It's well set up. So I'm in Egypt in 2006, and we were on this pilgrimage from temple to temple.
2006, you said?
Correct.
Okay.
And we're going from temple to temple, and the woman that was leading our tour had all the right connections so we could go in before it opened or after it closed and get the real Shakti of what lives in those those ancient structures. And so 3 couples were renewing their vows on the rooftop, and that same voice that back in 2004 told me I wouldn't act another day
So
the rest
after
of my
2
life.
years.
About 2 years, give or take. I was standing on the rooftop, and I hear that voice say, "Walk now." And mind you, this does not happen often. This isn't my like regular experience, but this happened again in this moment. So I end up walking, and it's telling me to turn right and turn left and go down this corridor and all the way around. And I'm back up on the roof at a different area of the temple, walk into a room about this size, and there's no outlet. There's no other doorway. And so I out loud said, "Now what?" And I heard the voice say, "Lie on your back." So I laid down, and on the ceiling, engraved on the ceiling, was this beautiful cartouche covered in black soot from all the cultures that had lived there subsequent to the Egyptian era. And I could see it though, and it was what I would later discover was the precession of the equinoxes, or the symbol of astrology in the Egyptian art expression. And I'm lying there, and like a cosmic steroid, I literally felt it moved through me, like just vroom. And I stood up and rejoined the group and didn't quite know what it meant. 2 days later, incidentally, I was walking down a street in Luxor, and this man pulls me to shop, and there on the wall is this beautiful papyrus with that same artwork, which is now on my wall at home. So I acquired that from him, and I get home from my Egypt trip. And at the time, I was studying astrology, and I was learning it very academically, and I was reading, and I was consistently pulling up charts of people that I knew, and I would kind of cross-reference who's got similar traits based on the same rising sign, and that was one of the ways I was learning. Pull up a chart, and instead of translating a foreign language, the story just was right there. I could see the entire story. It just like came to me, and so now when I look at a chart, if I really remember myself and get out of the way and do an invocation and presence myself, when I look at that chart, the story just comes through, just comes right through. And that was given to me in Egypt.
Wait. Are we here? This is like a movie. After being in this space of the fourth way, showing up in the marketplace, experiencing the philosophy of Gurdjieff's, you did not stop there. Of course, you experimented with astrology. And then you moved on and experimented with other modalities as well, be it psychedelics, plant medicine, acupuncture, somatic healing. What are the similarities and the differences in different modalities that you have learned and experimented with? And how do they all come together?
I would definitely say my approach has been very holistic. I've pulled from a lot of different traditions. I've found myself drawn to different plant medicines at different times. And this was all going on during the 20-year window of the fourth way work as well. So this was, I initiated my shamanic journey, if you will, around 29. And that was with a medicine called Bufo, which is 5-MeO-DMT, which is effectively what our brain, the transmitters that our brain send off the moment we die, is instituted. And the origin of this medicine is the saliva of a Sonoran toad that is actually extracted while they're in the middle of consummating, and which is a questionable practice in terms of the humanity of it. But the saliva is then crystallized, and then you vaporize it, and when inhaling it, it effectively floods your S7 receptor with serotonin to a point that you are literally dissolved into what I would call a tsunami of consciousness. It's very instantaneous.
Tsunami of consciousness.
Yeah, you're no longer in the ego. The ego is no longer there, and your capacity to chronologically track and remember that experience is offline.
Yeah.
So it's that initiated my path into understanding there was something greater and more, I should say, I had access to something more, and that what I really realized after my first ceremony was this world is a cosmic joke, that I take these things so seriously when that is the essence of what is consciousness, what is not identified, not in duality, not playing opposition, but genuinely in a non-dual state. So that was a big kind of eye-opener, both the third eye and eyes in general. And it was actually, that was when I pivoted out of acting too. It was all kind of simultaneous, it was all looped together, because as I say it now and reflect on it now, it was clear that I had more to consider than whatever my ego pursuits were driving me towards. And how this all molds together is, with the Vipassana meditation's another really big one that I advocate to anyone who feels compelled to do. A 10-day silent meditation is the best plant medicine you'll ever do, because then your brain has these chemicals, right? Our bodies produce DMT.
Why do you call Vipassana as a plant medicine?
Well, I say it somewhat metaphorically, but what I'll say is the ability to, in silent meditation,
and experience that tsunami of consciousness.
You go there.
Yeah.
You begin to go into a flood state of DMT, which is what is the active alkaloid in ayahuasca.
Got it.
5-MeO-DMT is a slight molecular difference. That's the bufo. So when you have these experiences that are induced by a visionary plant, you recognize the entheogenic state that is realizable in this life. The Buddha, Jesus, you pick out the saints and sages that have gone here and done that and taught in their ways, and institutions formed around them, which is its own conversation, but it is an amalgamation of that experience on top of personal practice. The thing about the visionary plant medicine experiences is many in endeavor to learn and understand and even heal in that space. But often what's missed or forgotten is the integration and the practices to fully embody the insights. Otherwise, it's a peak experience that a week later you barely remember.
Yeah.
And you have a story to tell, but not a consciousness that you've actually integrated more fully.
Yeah. This is like from a starry world of Hollywood to the tsunami of consciousness, a journey of a lifetime. That should be one of the movies that should be made onto you.
I like it.
Yeah.
I hope so. Yeah.
Ryan, psychedelics, a word which is quite mysterious for most of them. How come that's not legal in the world? In most parts of the world, it's not legal. And yet, Vipassana, meditation, yoga, all the other ways of experiencing communion within yourself and connecting with the universal Brahman. That's well celebrated, and yet that world of psychedelics is not at all legalized, be it ayahuasca ceremonies or MDMAs or LSD or mushrooms.
I could go a couple directions with that.
Yeah.
We could talk about the control of the big pharma and where they can't profit from, and in fact might have their profit model impaired by the acceptance or legalization of these practices. That's one way, and that's interesting. But I will go further. I feel like in myself, as I think about the Gurdjieffian work, that it had to be sought out. It had to be earned. And is there a part of our design that either it's the rebel in us as an archetype that's going to go down to Peru or the Amazon where it is legal to do it, and to do it in a good way within an indigenous setting.
Yeah.
I could elaborate further on, or go on forever really, about the United States and the misgivings of the legislative restrictions on these otherwise healing substances and practices. And I'd be out of my pay grade to make any strong accusations about it, but I would say in general, if I get out of the idea that there's some evil force limiting access to what is God-given for our opportunity to grow and ultimately awaken and heal, then I would just say that it is a moving needle right now. There is legalization of psilocybin for medical use for terminal cancer patients, right? And there is a growing legalization and practice of psychedelic assisted therapy. So there is a movement in that direction. And I also would agree that to have it completely unrestricted and uneducated, it could be dangerous for people who aren't versed in those spaces or don't have someone to hold space and integrate and assimilate what just happened or what's in the midst of happening.
Yeah.
And I think ultimately that it is a burgeoning awareness. Here we are talking about it, and there are many that are talking about it, many educated psychologists and people with certifications greater than my own that are recognizing and championing and advocating for its legalized use. So, prayers that we get what we need when we need it,
Yeah. So how do you bring all these modalities together when you're working with people? Be it your understanding of psychology, your understanding of somatic healing, your understanding of how to use this substance in case they are available, your understanding of what you have learned from the fourth way, and your own journey, your own experiences. How do you bring all these modalities together when you're working, when you're serving an individual?
I mean, in a word, listening. I'm not doing anything if I'm really honest. And if I'm present with someone's moment and process, then all of that finds its place in its right alignment for that ripeness of moving the needle from energy being stuck or trauma being identified with to disbursement and integration of those things. So I have had the good fortune of having brilliant teachers, and I bow at the altar of their lineages, and I've just, I've never done, like the best session I ever have is the one that I didn't think about it or have to figure out anything. It just happened the way it needed to happen.
It just happened.
Yeah.
It just happened. And lots happen through us. If only we can disidentify ourselves from the doer who has been the chosen one to be the conduit to make something possible.
That what's coming to me is Mahatma Gandhi, who said, if the best way to find yourself is to lose yourself in the service of others. And that says it all to me, because that's what, if someone's coming to me for a session and that's what I'm being initiated on my soul's journey to let the archetype be fully present, and then there's no preconceived idea of what's going to happen, but rather a presencing to what needs to happen. And that is ultimately built in the service oriented, and my soul and my heart is more fulfilled in that than an Academy Award.
Your life has been like a journey of all the ups and downs, as Joseph Campbell talks about the hero's journey. You spoke about so many ups. You spoke about so many challenging situations in your life, and few moments in your life which has been quite mystical in nature.
Yeah.
You spoke about a mold experience that was life-threatening to you. And from there also, you came out. Tell us about that. What happened? How did you deal with that?
Well, I when everything collapsed in the Saturn return and the relationship came to an end, I rented a house in Los Angeles that, unbeknownst to me, had black mold in the walls. And in fact, it was basically next to my bed. So for 2 years, I'm inhaling this, not knowing. I went from having a thick, enviable head of hair to like losing hair to joints, like physical deterioration. And fortunately, I had enough practices. I was doing Qigong every day, a medical, traditional Chinese medical practice, along with yoga, along with juicing. And I was barely staying ahead of it, not knowing what it was and not really looking for any Western medical diagnosis. I just was thinking I'm in my Saturn return, I'm a Scorpio, I'm going deep into the insanity of the psyche, and this is just what I'm supposed to be doing, not knowing that I'm being infested and intoxicated more and more with this
Physically, biologically.
Yeah, and to understand what mold does in the system, when the mycotoxins are released into the air and then you absorb that through your lungs, it forms a network in your body, and what it needs
the small particles.
Yeah, it's a full on like a neural network going on. It's like the mycotoxic. There's a word for it, but the basic understanding is that this system in order to thrive, needs its host to be in a state of stress. It actually feeds and thrives and strengthens on that. So as the acupuncturist who diagnosed me and would treat me for a year and a half told me, he said, what you don't realize is that it's no longer you making the choices you're making. So I'm entering into relationships that are just chaotic and making foolish choices. I'm just doing all these things to create more and more stress.
Because that's where all those molds thrive.
Yes. So effectively, it says your entire nervous system has been co-opted, and so you're now acting on behalf of this toxic network that needs you to be in stress to thrive. And so I was, like I said, it was a chaotic time in my life. Deep, and I was down on my knees. There was one point where, fortunately, the neighbor's dog came to my door. This is another divine moment, really. And I was on the floor crying in a ball, and I could not figure out a reason to stay alive. I was genuinely in suicidal ideation, flood states of just end it. It's that dark, and I don't know what's happened, and blah, 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 and I did something wrong. And all of a sudden, this dog, because I had my door open, the dog walks in and just literally curls up, and I'm holding this dog crying, and it literally was like a divine gift of, there's something to hold on to.
You're finding resource in something external to you,
Yeah.
rather than finding resources within.
Yeah. From within, I was lost. There was no sourcing from that. And then shortly thereafter was when the acupuncturist diagnosed me, and then we went about approaching the healing process of mold, which is its own thing. And it infests more people than people realize. Like there are symptoms, like there's anxiety, there's stress, there's like kind of unwarranted relative to life circumstance. Like, why am I so lost and feeling either brain foggy or fatigued, and these things that are abnormal? One thing to look at is see if there isn't in fact a mold infestation in your body relative to your environment, right? And so going through an acupuncture process with a lot of herbs from the traditional Chinese medical perspective was the key to moving at least enough out that I got my cognitive, like I wasn't under control and making choices on behalf of this mold. And then to really deliver what was the key for me to getting my full cognitive faculties back and having the social anxiety, which I had never had in my life, but suddenly got really pronounced. I was becoming more and more isolated and less comfortable. It didn't make any sense, right? And so in the plant medicine space, there's a medicine called Kambo. Kambo, Kambo. And what that is it's actually, it's a layer of a frog from the Amazon that has no indigenous predators because it's poisonous. Like the skin is poisonous. But in the Amazon tribes that work with this understood that if you scrape that off in a way that's sustainable so the frog will grow it back, or not take enough, I'm not sure how that works exactly, but the point being, you take this off, you formulate it into a paste, and then if you burn what's called a gate, which is like taking incense and just breaking that blood-skin barrier, and you apply that paste, and mind you, you do this after you've fasted for about 8 hours and you've consumed about a half a gallon of water. And within few minutes, you are violently purging. Because what this spirit does, or this substance does, is it actually, it orients into your system, and then it effectively latches onto and pulls out what doesn't belong. So heavy metals, in my case, mold, parasites. You can bring the toxins that have been accumulated into your body out with this medicine. And the tribes that work with it in the Amazon will do it before they go hunting, because it heightens your senses, because even the noise in our minds.
You're so clean within.
Exactly. From physiology, but even from the psychology, the noise or the challenges of life, whatever you're chewing on, suddenly just have a less of a holding on your awareness. So when they go hunting, they've got their senses more acute to effectively achieve what they go out to achieve and get their dinner and so forth.
It's so important to keep your physical space clean. In Vastu, we talk about that.
Yeah.
That's very important to be aware of what's happening around us, because it has a direct impact onto how you are going to show up. But what you just spoke about was so informative for me. So informative for me.
Well, and what you were speaking about, our environment, and if we look at it from a vibrational field, it's about coherency. You know, here we are having a great conversation. We have a dear appreciation and love for one another as brothers, and so we have a coherency that's really seamless in our exchange. If you look at your environment, it's messy, and suddenly then your coherent field is disrupted.
Yeah.
And that's true of the toxins or the noise in our minds or the conditioned ways of perceiving ourselves or the wounds we haven't fully resolved and reconciled. So it really is about achieving coherency. And that's like feng shui, you know, as far as the environment and the order of things, the vibrational current that we're in. It's a real thing.
So at this point in time, what are your views on modern medicine and the alternative medicine? And today, when you experience a sense of dissonance within your own self, physically, biologically, where do you turn to? Western or alternative? And I mean, where is the point where the energy of the West meets the wisdom of the East?
Well, I'll as a Westerner, I'll answer your question that it is the East that holds the true fundamental healing that is necessary, whereas Western medicine, at least when it comes to treating many disorders, are symptom-based. And whenever you take a medication, whether it's natural or whether it's synthetic, anything that has an effect is going to have some side effect, right? And so if you look at the Western model where something's prescribed, let's say you have anxiety, and you're prescribed an SSRI or some form of anti-anxiety medication, and suddenly now you're flatlining creatively or you're not feeling exuberant with life. And so what do we take to boost that up? And suddenly then we're just, you know, we're robbing from Peter to pay Paul. And allopathic medicine has its place. I'm not here to vilify it. I just believe that the majority of maladies and disorders are best approached, certainly initially, from an Eastern approach. You find a wise and gifted practitioner, chances are, in ways you might never have even imagined, there are mechanisms of healing that will occur that doesn't require us to toxify our body with a chemical. You know, it's not natural. And many of the diseases we have now, coming back to the allopathic system and the absence of nutritional awareness that exists within the educational system of medicine in the West, is a direct reflection of the chronic disease that exists in the United States, for example, and the metabolic imbalances from the ultra processed foods and the chemicals that are sprayed on the you know, the fruits and the vegetables in the agricultural system. Then there's a brother sister duo named Casey and Callie Means. Casey was a graduate of Stanford Medical School and dropped out of her residency because she couldn't buy into the system that she had been investing, you know, many years of her life as a gifted physician. And then also her brother, who worked he was a lobbyist for Coca-Cola, and how he knows that side of the world. And they realized that there's this conflated interest of get them sick and provide the medication to heal them. And you've doubled down on your profit model, and the Bears of the world and those that own these these vertical conglomerates of so many of these companies, they're talking about it with a great deal more education information than I have. But to realize that the Western culture right now, and the Maha movement with Robert Kennedy Jr., there's an awareness that the metabolic health is the source point of illness and chronic disease. And now there are food companies like ours, for example, Living Prana, and what we're doing is recognizing that, wait, there's a way to feed the body without toxifying it. And in fact, functional food, you can literally enhance your physical and your mental experience with what you consume. So food as medicine, right? And so that, obviously there's a subtle plug there, but there's also an awareness that what we put in our bodies, and the Western model is now beginning to wake up. You know, my sister is an emergency medical physician and a professor of emergency medicine, and my brother-in-law is a surgeon. I was just back with them a month ago, and it was so eye-opening for me because they live in the Midwest and I live in California. I've got my own bubble of people that are more progressive and pioneering in their thought, in their awareness of what is true healing and health in the bubble I live in anyway, but in the Midwest, to see them talking about Casey Means and her book Good Energy, and my brother-in-law is reading that right now and recognizing the truth that, oh, we're now seeing it's metabolic health.
Yeah.
The mental illness and all the statistics that are so on the rise and have been basically since the introduction of ultra-processed foods, and how that is something like 65% of the average American's diet when it shouldn't be any percent.
Yeah.
Whole foods
Yeah.
or functional foods that naturally don't require the body to process something that doesn't belong.
Yeah.
Right?
So, Ryan, help me understand, what was that moment in your life? I do understand that very early you developed that interest because of what was happening within you. You could connect the dots because of your multi-discipline interests and the experiences that you've had in your life. What was that moment when you said to yourself that now it's time, I need to hold and take the reins in my hand and start living prana? And why did you call it living prana?
Great question. I'll start with the last question. So Living Prana, my business partner, Brian Murphy, who's my co-founder of the company, and I formed our company on Maui in Hawaii, an island in Hawaii. And PranaCakes was the first creation. And so we knew we wanted the brand to have prana in it. And being a yogi for as long as I have been and understanding the vital life force energy that we're effectively cultivating in our practices and also cultivating in what we put in our bodies, to have living food or living prana in our systems as opposed to things that have no vibrational value whatsoever. It's empty calories, requires the body to do all these unnecessary processes that create over the long term dis-ease, right? So living prana really came out of the product PranaCakes I actually created at Burning Man,
Yeah.
the festival
It's the music festival.
yeah, it's among other things. Yeah, there's like it's a massive 80,000 person gathering in a dry lake bed in northern Nevada. It's like a desert setting, really. And the fun origin story is I had been up for 24 hours. I had already been there for about 9 days, and I was just exhausted. I was depleted. And having a Chinese medical background, understanding herbology, recognizing, well, if I were at home, I'd put spirulina and cacao and maca and ashwagandha, and I would put that into a smoothie with, with fruit and so forth. And I don't have a blender. I'm in the middle of the desert here, but I do have a pancake mix and a camping stove. So I threw it all in, and it was so delicious. That was the shocking part. I just wanted to get it in my body, but it was also nutritious. And so what happened is everybody in my camp, I made pancakes for everybody, and they were, loving them. And then days later, people were blown away. They're like, I felt amazing. I wasn't hungry all day. I had energy. I thought I was, I was tired before I ate them, and now I feel amazing. So it kind of just came to be that I would make these for friends and family. And then I developed the brain cakes during COVID. Again, playing with nootropics and understanding functional mushrooms and adaptogens, and realizing, wait, I don't believe that coffee and caffeine is my smartest move first thing in the morning. It kind of gets me a little bit jittery and a little bit anxious, and I don't feel like I'm my best version of myself. A little bit irritable, right? And so I thought, well, if I could just have the morning ritual, but with a non-coffee related concoction, and that's what became the ingredients of brain cakes. And so born out of necessity from, it's kind of, if it doesn't exist, then you have to invent it for yourself. If you recognize there's a desire for it or a need for it. And then we've discovered with time that there's a significant need for functional food.
There is a need,
Yeah. So we just took it on as our mission to bring prana to the people, to actually bring about an awareness of how functional food can not only just sustain you, but actually elevate your performance, your cognition, your memory, your focus, your energy.
So that has become your biohack.
Yeah.
So if you look at your life today, what are your practices to, as you said, to open the nadis and to look at where I need to breathe in, and in terms of the different dimensions of a human being, what are your practices when it comes to taking care of your physical health and your emotional health and your intellectual health and your spiritual health, to bring in that kind of alignment and stillness and yet activation and continue to be high on vitality? Now, these are the secrets that you're going to share with me. That was the primary objective of having Ryan on this podcast, to look at how can we touch 1400 testosterons.
Well, I'll start by saying that what works for me isn't going to work for everybody, and what I'm called to is utterly unique to my constitution, right?
Yeah.
So I'm a Pitta Vata. I got a lot of fire, and for me, cultivating yin is part of the practice. I mean, I love a yang practice. Yang being more initiative, assertive. So with that, a yoga practice, a minimum 3 days a week, preferably more like 4 or 5. And Vipassana meditation every morning to start the day, cold plunge after that, and the ability to basically attune your system to adversity. Cold plunging for 3 minutes a day is an amazing practice to develop an adaptability to adverse environments. And so it's also anti-inflammatory, and it's so healthy. It boosts your immune system because you're, again, like the maca root, your maca plant, you're putting yourself in an environment that requires you to push back in an internal way, not like push, but rather like revitalize in the midst of, just like all life experience, we get stronger in adversity, and we need the other to see ourselves and to push up against where our shadows live and what we need to see in ourselves, right? There's, and then weights. I do weights almost every day, but not a lot, like 45 minutes with very specific body parts. So you want 48 hours rest after you lift a certain muscle group, right? So I'll do chest and bicep one day with abs. And abs and legs are 2 muscle groups that don't need that the long-term rest like other muscle groups. So I'll do chest and bicep one day, back and tricep the next day, and legs and shoulders the third day. And so by the 4th day, I'm back to day 1, because I give my body those muscle groups enough space to rest and recuperate. And the big piece in all of it too is sleep. I mean, sleep is as critical, if not the most critical thing you can do.
It's so underrated, and it's so vital, it's so important.
It is. There's a book by Matthew Walker, Why We Sleep. It's on like Audible and Spotify, all that. Beautiful book. It woke me up to probably a couple years I cost myself looking back at the nights I was staying up till 2 in the morning.
And screwed it up already.
Yeah, I'm like, well, okay, I guess, because then they also say you don't get that back.
Yeah.
Like, the axiom that they play with is, I'll sleep when I die. It's more literal than we realize.
I remember my dad used to tell me that you don't sleep right now as much as you should, and someday you'll realize that. Now, of course, my dad is not there in the body form, but now I know why he used to say that.
Yeah.
And on daily basis, what kind of food do you eat, Mayan?
So what I found to work for my system, and there's a lot of literature out there from certified nutritionists and so forth, that protein in the morning is what we want to start with. Protein and fat. Want to wait for carbs as best we can. Like a heavy carb load at the front of the day isn't the wisest move, because we want our metabolism to be working and assimilating protein into our systems before we then have the carbs. So usually like this is about 90% of the carbs I have are through these products that I created, because I recognized buckwheat is an amazing source of amino acids and nutrients and vitamins from what's a seed, actually. So it's in other words, I avoid gluten, I avoid grains.
And dairy products as well.
Yeah, and dairy as well. And the ability to take a complex carbohydrate like a buckwheat that isn't a seed or a grain. Grains are inflammatory in the system, as some studies, at least refined grains. And so if you look at the ability to then digest something cleanly that has it doesn't require energy to process it, but you're actually sourcing energy from its presence in your system, that's when you're in a thriving space. And so that's, like I said, probably my go-to. And then I'll do like a bone broth or a vegetable broth and make sure I'm getting enough protein. You want like 1 gram of protein per pound in body weight. And another thing, I supplement a lot with perfect aminos, which is just essential amino acids, where it doesn't even break a fast. You can actually take amino acids in, and your body assimilates 99% of that into the protein your body needs, versus meat being at 60% and chicken and fish being lower. And so there's an ability to take in amino acids through supplementation that I found to be essential.
So your life has been quite a rich life as you look back, isn't it?
Yeah.
And now you are an entrepreneur as well. You're not just a healer. You're not just a somatic practitioner. You are not just an astrologer. You are not just an actor. you are an entrepreneur as well. As they say it in entrepreneurship, at times people miss out on the very basic ingredients of what it means to be a human. At times you have to compromise on your values as well. How do you bring the life of a dharma that you're onto and the blood of any business, which is revenue? How do these bring these two together?
Beautiful question. I mean, I certainly maintain an aim of not compromising my values. And what I think you're pointing to more is the sacrifices that being an entrepreneur requires. And at the root of it, it's the why. Why are we doing this? Why is this something that we are giving up other life experiences to build and grow? And, we have seen more and more in our process of being deeper and deeper into the food space, the consumer packaged goods space, and therefore the nutritional health space, the value add that it is, the need in the marketplace for alternatives to what's out there. Dr. Robert Lustig said that 73% of everything on the shelves in the supermarket is categorically consumable poison.
Yeah.
And to think that that's my why. Like that's my, okay, I'm going to get up in the morning, I'm going to handle the thing that, is interrupting my, my desired spending of my time. And it really comes down to back again to service, right? Yeah.
To reduce that 73%.
Precisely.
Which is on the shelves already. As we are moving on, if you were to give a piece of advice to people who feel a sense of stuckness in their lives, what would that be?
First thing that comes to mind is move your body, engage your body. This organism, when engaged, releases neurochemicals and neurotransmitters of dopamine, serotonin, adrenaline, things that suddenly we actually, and endorphins that just helps us feel better. So that's the simple one, is engage your body mindfully, actively, deliberately, and otherwise ask for help. If it's a stuck, and that can even be Chat GPT. That can be finding information like what is this symptomatic of, and maybe prompt all your symptoms, and be honest about it, and let Chat GPT tell you, or a doctor, or a friend, or whomever that you trust, that there is a solution to the problem. There is an ability to move through what otherwise feels insurmountable. That's always true. I would say that about anything. Every day.
Yeah. In between, you said there are no problems, there are only solutions. And I would go back to the three basic learnings that I had. Go back to your intentions. The second one is remember your aim. And third is, as you said, reconcile. Ryan, thank you so much. It was an absolute delight and a pleasure having you.
It's been my honor to be here, share this time with you. And the last thing I want to throw in is meditation as well. Meditation is a key ingredient. There's enough studies to support that. So from moving your body to nutritionally meeting your body with its needs, meditation. I just had to throw meditation in because I would feel I can't sit next to Paramahansa Yogananda here and not acknowledge the potency and the value of meditation. But thank you, Gaurav, for having me. It's been really a pleasure.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. I'm sure you would have loved this conversation as much as I did. Would love to hear from you. What are your key takeaways? We spoke about a lot of themes. We spoke about serendipity. We spoke about the messages that we get from the universe, and yet at times we don't listen to them. We spoke about the whole profound practice of listening. We spoke about the somatic practices. We spoke about entrepreneurship. We spoke about healing. What's that one thing that you are taking away from this conversation? And who's that one person in your life, be it your family members, your friends, your relatives, and any of your acquaintances that you feel should listen to this beautiful conversation that I just had with Ryan? Do share the link with those people, because we all need what Ryan spoke about, the very basics of life. I look forward to meeting you again next week with yet another powerful conversation with yet another interesting guest. Take care of yourself, stay tuned, and forget not to subscribe us on YouTube and follow us on Spotify and Apple Podcast. Take care, stay blessed.